The summoning. The Galactic Council chamber hung in the void between stars, a crystalline sphere large enough to swallow moons. Inside, representatives from 800 civilizations waited in their designated atmospheric zones, each breathing their native gases, each maintaining their preferred gravity and temperature. The chamber was a marvel of engineering that had taken the architects of Veln 3,000 years to perfect. Today it would bear witness to something unprecedented. Ambassador Thalen Vrex of the Korthian Empire adjusted his sensory stalks, watching the central dais with barely concealed contempt. The Korthians had ruled the galactic east for 60 millennia, their crystalline warships capable of cracking planets. He had voted against this gathering. It was beneath them. Beside him, the floating consciousness of Miriana Quellis, High Arbiter of the Luminal Collective, pulsed with curious amber light. Her people existed as pure thought, having shed their physical forms 12 million years ago. She had seen empires rise and fall like waves on a shore. This moment, she sensed, carried unusual weight. "They arrive," announced Coordinator Zephix, the six-armed administrator whose species, the Hexarians, had organized galactic governance for longer than most civilizations had existed. His voice carried through the translation matrix, rendered perfectly in each listener's language and cultural context. The chamber's central viewing portal shimmered. Through it stepped three figures. They were bipedal, which was common enough. They wore simple dark blue garments with silver insignia, nothing elaborate. Their skin tones varied, one with deep brown pigmentation, one pale cream, one golden tan. Hair in different configurations. They moved with a peculiar fluid grace, each step measured yet relaxed. Humans. The species that had appeared from nowhere 200 cycles ago, establishing themselves in a neglected spiral arm of the galaxy. The species that had politely declined 7 invitations to join the greater galactic community. The species that every intelligence agency in known space had failed to properly assess. The species that had just destroyed the Vrakan swarm. The lead human, a woman with silver-streaked black hair and eyes like dark earth, stepped to the speaking circle. Her identification badge read, Ambassador Dr. Kalen Thorne, United Terran Systems. "Honored Council," she said, her voice steady and surprisingly warm. "Thank you for this audience." Thalen Vrex's translator implant processed not just her words but the subtle harmonics beneath. Confidence. Not the boastful kind he expected from young species, but something deeper. Certainty. "The Vrakan swarm," Coordinator Zephix began without preamble, "has menaced the Outer Rim for 8,000 years. 73 civilizations have fallen to their hunger. The Council's combined military forces managed only to contain them, never to defeat them. Yet your species, your humans, destroyed them in 17 solar days." A rumble moved through the chamber. Disbelief. Fear. Outrage. "We seek explanation," Zephix continued. "We demand transparency. What weapons did you employ? What technology could possibly?" "We used conventional kinetic weapons, directed energy platforms, and strategic coordination," the second human interrupted. This one, a man with copper-colored skin and gray eyes, wore the insignia of a military commander. His badge read, Admiral Jackson Crane, Terran Defense Fleet. His tone held no apology for the interruption. "Nothing that violates your forbidden technologies accords." "Impossible," Thalen Vrex spoke, his translator rendering his skepticism perfectly. "The Vrakan swarm consists of hive minds controlling trillions of biomechanical drones. They adapt instantly to any weapon. They learn. They evolve. Your species has existed in space for barely 2 centuries. You lack the computational power, the tactical experience, the brutality?" Ambassador Thorne's question cut through the chamber like a blade. Silence fell. It was not the polite quiet of diplomatic pause. It was the shocked hush of thousands of beings suddenly uncertain, suddenly afraid of what they might hear next. Ambassador Thorne stepped forward, her human eyes sweeping the chamber. When she spoke again, her voice had not risen, but something in it had changed. Something ancient. "Honored Council, you asked us here to explain. But first, let me ask you a question." She paused, and in that pause, Miriana Quellis felt something she had not experienced in 10 million years of consciousness. Anticipation. "How many of your species," Thorne asked softly, "evolved as apex predators?" The question hung in the recycled atmosphere like a suspended blade. Around the chamber, representatives looked to one another. The Korthians had evolved from herd animals. The Luminals from coral-like thinking reefs. The Hexarians from colony insects. The Delphinians from aquatic filter feeders. The third human, a woman with pale skin and calculating blue eyes, activated a holographic display. Her badge identified her as Dr. Sienna Vex, Xenoanthropology Division. Of the 800 species in this chamber, Dr. Vex stated, our analysis indicates that 796 evolved from prey species, scavengers or herbivores. 3 evolved from omnivorous opportunists. 1 species, she paused, evolved as pursuit predators. She didn't need to specify which one. The Vraken swarm, Admiral Crane said, his voice carrying the weight of recent battle, made a critical miscalculation. They assumed, as apparently many in this council assume, that technology level determines capability. That computational power equals strategic superiority. Ambassador Thorne folded her hands behind her back. They were half right. But they forgot something essential. Her eyes found Thalen Vrex across the chamber. They forgot to ask what kind of species builds technology in the first place. What drives the creation? What shapes the strategy? Coordinator Zephyx, she addressed the administrator directly, you asked how we defeated the Vraken. The answer is simple, though you may not like it. The chamber held its breath. We hunted them. The nature of predators. The holographic display expanded, filling the center of the chamber with a 3-dimensional tactical map. Red markers indicated Vraken swarm positions. Blue markers showed human fleet deployments. What caught every observer's attention was not the final state of the battle, but the 17 days compressed into a visual timeline. Dr. Sienna Vex manipulated the controls with practiced efficiency. Before we engaged the swarm, we observed them for 3 years. This is standard protocol for humanity when encountering potentially hostile entities. 3 years. Counselor Ithix of the Delphinian Chorus whistled in confusion. Her species communicated through complex sound harmonics. The swarm was actively consuming the Rethian colonies during that time. Millions died. You watched. Ambassador Thorne's expression didn't change, but her voice carried an edge. We watched. We learned. We understood. The Council has fought the Vraken for 8 millennia and never defeated them. We needed to know why before we acted. Admiral Crane stepped forward, his movements economical and precise. Every species in this chamber approaches warfare as crisis response. You develop weapons. You build shields. You react to threats. This is the thinking of prey. The word hung in the air like an accusation. Predators, Crane continued, think differently. We don't react. We plan. We study. We identify weakness. And then we strike with overwhelming precision. The timeline began to play. Miriana Quellis focused her consciousness on the tactical display, her ancient mind racing to comprehend the patterns emerging before her. The Vraken swarm's typical behavior showed in the data: expansion, consumption, adaptation. They were indeed learning organisms, each encounter with galactic forces teaching them new defense strategies. They had evolved countermeasures to every known weapon system, every tactical doctrine in the Council's considerable arsenal. Then the human ships appeared. Day 1, Dr. Vex narrated clinically. We engaged a minor tendril of the swarm in the Kelthos system. 3 destroyers against approximately 4 million drones. We employed standard plasma weaponry and railgun kinetics. We fought them, and we lost. Thalen Vrex's sensory stalks quivered with satisfaction. This confirmed what he believed. Humans were nothing special after all. Day 2, Vex continued. We engaged again in Kelthos. Different ships, identical tactics. We lost again. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Why repeat a failed strategy? Day 3 through 6. We engaged 4 more times. Different sectors but always small groups, always losing. The swarm adapted to our weapons as expected. They learned our tactics. They began to understand our capabilities. Ambassador Thorne smiled, and something about that smile made Miriana Quellis pulse with sudden understanding. They thought they knew us, Thorne said softly. They thought they had measured us. Admiral Crane manipulated the display. Day 7. We changed everything. The tactical map exploded with blue markers. Hundreds of human ships, appearing simultaneously across 17 star systems. But they weren't engaging. They were moving in patterns that seemed random, chaotic even. What is this? Coordinator Zephix's 6 arms gestured at the display in confusion. This isn't battle formation. This is disorder. This is a hunting tactic, explained Dr. Vex, that human persistence hunters developed over millions of years of evolution. We call it the scattered pursuit. You don't charge your prey directly. You don't reveal your full strength. You appear everywhere, forcing the prey to run, to expend energy, to make mistakes. The timeline accelerated. The Vraken swarm, responding to threats across 17 systems simultaneously, began to fragment. Its usual coordinated response patterns started breaking down as it tried to address multiple engagements. The Vraken's greatest strength, Admiral Crane noted, is their hive coordination and adaptability. But adaptation requires data processing. Coordination requires communication. Both require time. And we didn't give them any. Day 8 through 12 showed an increasingly frantic swarm response. The human ships kept appearing, striking, retreating before the swarm could properly respond. Never the same tactics twice. Never engaging long enough for adaptation to occur. Thalen Vrex felt an unfamiliar sensation creeping through his crystalline neural structure. It took him a moment to identify it. Unease. You were hurting them, Miriana Quellis spoke for the first time, her consciousness pulsing with grim realization. Ambassador Thorne nodded. We were hurting them. Pushing them, subtly, into specific positions. The swarm thought they were pursuing us, thought they were adapting to contain a new threat. They didn't realize they were being guided. The display showed day 13. The swarm, now concentrated into 3 main clusters, had positioned itself precisely where the scattered human forces had been gradually driving it. The Corvus Nebula, Admiral Crane stated. Massive electromagnetic interference. Sensor systems degraded by 90%. Communication lag increased by a factor of 8. You led them into terrain that favored you, Counselor Ithix breathed. We led them into terrain that neutralized their advantages, Crane corrected. In the nebula, their hive coordination degraded. Their adaptation speed decreased. Their numbers became a liability, too many drones, too much communication lag to coordinate effectively. Day 14. The human fleet, no longer scattered, emerged from hiding positions throughout the nebula in coordinated strike groups. We didn't use new weapons, Dr. Vex explained. We used timing, precision, knowledge of our enemy. We struck at their communication nodes first. Not to destroy them, but to isolate swarm segments from each other. The display showed surgical strikes, each one calculated to cause maximum disruption to the swarm's collective intelligence. Separated groups of drones, unable to coordinate, began exhibiting confused behaviors. Without central coordination, Ambassador Thorne said, the swarm's adaptation capability dropped by 98%. Each isolated group became predictable, manageable. Days 15 through 17 showed systematic annihilation. The divided swarm segments, cut off from their collective intelligence, fell to concentrated human firepower. No dramatic superweapon. No technological miracle. Just patient, methodical destruction of an enemy that had been maneuvered into defeat before the final battle ever began. When the display faded, silence held the chamber once more. You made it look easy, Coordinator Zephyx finally said, his voice containing something that might have been fear. In 17 days you accomplished what we could not in 8,000 years. It wasn't easy, Admiral Crane replied. It was inevitable. Once we understood our enemy, once we had them positioned, the outcome was determined. That's the difference between hunting and fighting. Thalen Vrex found his voice. This changes nothing. You defeated one enemy through cunning. But the galaxy contains threats beyond your comprehension. The Korthian Empire alone commands. We know exactly what the Korthian Empire commands, Ambassador Thorne interrupted, her eyes finding his across the chamber. Ship counts, weapon capabilities, tactical doctrines, supply line vulnerabilities, political fracture points, and the personal psychological profiles of your 17 top military commanders. The silence that followed felt different. Heavier. We know these things, Thorne continued quietly, about every major military power in this chamber. Not because we plan aggression but because knowledge is survival. Because 3 years ago, we decided that if we were going to live in this galaxy, we needed to understand it completely. She looked around the chamber, meeting eyes and sensory organs and consciousness pulses. You called us here to explain how we destroyed the Vraken. We've shown you. But that's not really what you want to know, is it? Her voice softened. What you really want to know is, are humans a threat to you? The question nobody had dared ask hung in the recycled air. Let me tell you a story, Ambassador Thorne said, about what humans are. And then you can decide for yourselves. Lessons from Earth. Ambassador Thorne gestured to Dr. Vex, who brought up a new holographic display. This time, it showed a blue-green planet rotating slowly in the chamber's center. Oceans glittered. Clouds swirled. Continents sprawled beneath atmospheric hazes. Earth, Thorne said simply. Our homeworld. To most in the chamber, It appeared unremarkable. Standard Class M planet. Single medium star. Ordinary composition. The Korthian Empire alone contains 17,000 such worlds. What makes Earth unique? Dr. Vex began, zooming the display to show various terrain types, isn't its physical properties. It's the competitive environment that shaped its dominant predator, us. The display shifted to show various Earth creatures. Massive reptilian forms with crushing jaws. Felines with extended claws and powerful muscles. Canines hunting in coordinated packs. Primates swinging through forest canopies. Earth didn't just have one apex predator, Dr. Vex continued. It had dozens across different eras and ecosystems. The evolutionary pressure was immense. To survive, our ancestors needed advantages that went beyond physical capabilities. A new image appeared, an early human standing upright on an African savanna, watching a herd of animals larger and stronger than itself. We weren't the fastest, Admiral Crane said. Cheetahs could run 3 times our speed. We weren't the strongest, Earth gorillas could tear us apart. We weren't the most numerous, insect colonies numbered in the billions. We didn't have natural weapons. No claws, no venom, no crushing bite force. So how did you survive? Counselor Ithics asked, genuinely curious now. We thought, Ambassador Thorne replied. We adapted. We cooperated. We planned. And most importantly, we never gave up. The display showed early humans tracking prey across vast distances. Persistence hunting, Dr. Vex explained. We couldn't outrun our prey in a sprint, but we could follow it for days. We could track it across any terrain. We could coordinate with others of our kind. Eventually, the prey would collapse from exhaustion. We won through endurance. A new scene showed humans fashioning tools from stone and wood. We augmented our capabilities. If we lacked claws, we created blades. If we lacked speed, we created weapons that struck from distance. Every limitation became a problem to solve, and we became very good at solving problems. The display fast-forwarded through human history. Agriculture, cities, writing, mathematics, metallurgy, each innovation building on the last. But here's what you need to understand, Thorne said, her voice taking on a harder edge. Earth didn't just shape us during our evolution. It continued to shape us throughout our history. Because we weren't just hunting animals. Eventually, we were competing with each other. The display darkened, showing images that made even the battle-hardened members of the Council shift uncomfortably. Battles, sieges, warfare on scales that ranged from individual combat to continental conflicts. Humanity fought itself, Thorne stated flatly. For 10,000 years, we refined the art of warfare against opponents who thought exactly like us, who adapted as quickly as we did, who were just as determined, just as creative, just as relentless. Admiral Crane stepped forward. Every major human civilization developed independently, creating unique tactical doctrines. Then we encountered each other, learned from each other, competed with each other. Strategies that took other species millennia to develop, we compressed into centuries through constant, brutal testing. The display showed various forms of human conflict. Phalanx formations, naval warfare, aerial combat, strategic bombing, guerrilla tactics, cyber warfare. We learned deception, Dr. Vex continued clinically. Misdirection, propaganda, false retreats, ambushes, feints. Every psychological manipulation, every tactical trick, tested against opponents sophisticated enough to recognize and counter them. And we kept inventing new ones. We learned logistics, Crane added. How to supply armies across hostile terrain. How to sustain operations over years. How to maintain technological and production superiority. Wars were won not just on battlefields but in factories, laboratories, and economic systems. We learned strategy that spanned generations, Thorne said. Cold wars where weapons were built but never used, where the threat was enough. We learned to think in layers, immediate tactical needs, operational campaigns, strategic objectives, and grand strategic visions that encompassed decades or centuries. Thalen Vrex felt his earlier unease crystallizing into something approaching dread. You're saying your entire species evolved specifically for warfare? No, Thorne corrected firmly. We evolved for survival in an extremely competitive environment. Warfare was one expression of that adaptation, but not the only one. The display shifted again, showing different images now. Human art, music, literature, science, acts of compassion, cooperation across cultural boundaries, rescue efforts, medical advances. We also evolved cooperation at scales that seem to surprise you, Thorne continued. We built civilizations that spanned our entire planet. We created art that moved billions. We developed philosophy, ethics, mathematics, and science. The same adaptability that made us effective hunters and warriors also made us effective problem solvers, creators, and collaborators. Miriana Quellis pulsed thoughtfully. You are saying humanity contains multitudes. The capacity for both extreme violence and extreme cooperation. Exactly, Thorne agreed. We're not monsters. But we're not naive either. We understand conflict because we've lived it for our entire history. And that understanding made us very good at ending conflicts decisively when necessary. The display returned to the Vraken campaign. When we studied the swarm, we recognized patterns. Patterns of expansion, adaptation, and coordination that reminded us of tactical doctrines from our own history. Not identical but similar enough. So we applied human counter-strategies, refined over millennia of warfare. The scattered pursuit? Counselor Ithix asked. Based on tactics used by Mongol cavalry in Earth's 13th century, Dr. Vex confirmed. The principle of appearing everywhere, forcing the enemy to fragment their response. The herding into disadvantageous terrain? Employed by various Earth cultures, Admiral Crane noted. The key is making the enemy think they're making their own choices while subtly constraining their options. The disruption of communication and command? Critical in every major human conflict for the past 3,000 years, Crane replied. Cut the head from the body, and even the most sophisticated enemy becomes manageable. Coordinator Zefix's 6 arms gestured in a way that conveyed deep consideration. You're telling us that your species' entire evolutionary and cultural history was preparation for exactly this kind of challenge. We're telling you, Ambassador Thorne said, that when you asked humans to deal with a threat that had menaced the galaxy for 8,000 years, you were asking a species that has been dealing with threats since before we could speak. It's what we do. It's what made us. She paused, letting that sink in. But here's what else you need to know, she continued, her voice softening. That same history taught us the cost of endless conflict. Every human alive today grew up learning about the wars that nearly destroyed us. The atomic age when we came within minutes of rendering our own planet uninhabitable. The biological warfare that created plagues. The environmental devastation of unchecked industrial warfare. The display showed images of devastation. Ruined cities. Contaminated landscapes. Then, slowly, images of recovery. Rebuilding. Treaties. Cooperation. We learned to temper our capabilities with wisdom, Thorne said. We learned that being able to destroy an enemy doesn't mean you should. We learned that the greatest victories are the ones where conflict never occurs because cooperation proves more beneficial to all parties. We learned, she added with emphasis, to ask why we fight before we decide how to fight. She looked around the chamber. So yes, humans can be dangerous. We can be relentless. We can be frighteningly effective when we decide something needs to be done. But we can also be the most loyal allies you'll ever have. The most creative problem solvers. The most determined defenders of principles we believe in. Which brings us, Ambassador Thorne said, to why we really accepted this invitation. The proposal. The holographic display faded, leaving only the assembled species in their various atmospheric zones, all attention focused on the 3 humans standing in the center of the chamber. Ambassador Thorne took a breath before speaking. When she did, her voice carried a weight that transcended mere words. The Vraken swarm is gone. That threat is ended. But in studying the swarm, in reviewing the Council's 8,000-year conflict with them, we learned something that troubles us deeply. She gestured to Dr. Vex, who brought up a new display. A tactical analysis showing not the Vraken engagement, but the Council's historical response to it. You had the resources to defeat the swarm, Dr. Vex stated bluntly. Combined fleet tonnage, technological sophistication, industrial capacity, the Council's advantages over the Vraken were overwhelming. Yet you fought them to a stalemate for 8 millennia. The question is, why? The chamber erupted in defensive murmurs. Thalen Vrex rose to his full height, his crystalline body reflecting light in sharp angles. How dare you imply? We're not implying, Admiral Crane cut him off. We're stating fact. Your species, Ambassador Vrex, alone possesses sufficient military force to have contained the swarm to a single system. Yet you committed minimal resources, as did every other major power in this chamber. The uncomfortable silence returned. You fought them piecemeal, Crane continued relentlessly. Every species protecting its own borders, sharing minimal intelligence, coordinating only when absolutely necessary. 800 civilizations and not one committed to actual victory, only to defense. Why? Coordinator Zephix's 6 arms folded in a gesture that might have been resignation. You already know why. You studied us as thoroughly as you studied the swarm. We'd like you to say it, Ambassador Thorne said gently. The ancient administrator's voice carried weariness. Because cooperation is difficult. Because species that evolved from prey are naturally cautious, territorial. Because sharing military intelligence means revealing vulnerabilities. Because committing forces to a distant threat means reducing defenses at home. Because 800 different governments with 800 different priorities will never agree on coordinated action until crisis forces their hand. And by then, Dr. Vex added, it's usually too late. The Rethine colonies learned that. So did the 72 civilizations before them. Miriana Quellis pulsed in her containment field. You're describing the fundamental paradox of galactic civilization. We have achieved technological sophistication, but we remain limited by our evolutionary psychology. Prey species cooperate within their groups but struggle with strangers. We built this council to overcome that limitation, but you built it wrong, Thorne finished for her. Not through malice or stupidity, but because you designed it according to your nature. Consensus-based, defensive-focused, reactive rather than proactive. It works well enough for trade, for cultural exchange, for managing minor disputes. But when facing existential threats, it fails. It will always fail. And you have a better way? Thalen Vrex's tone dripped with skepticism, though his earlier arrogance had diminished. We have a different way, Ambassador Thorne corrected. Not necessarily better, that's for you to judge. But different based on how humans evolved to face threats. Admiral Crane manipulated the display, showing organizational charts. Human military history eventually produced something we call a unified command structure. When facing common threats, we learned to subordinate individual unit autonomy to centralized coordination. One commander, one strategy, total information sharing, resources deployed where they're most effective rather than where each unit prefers to keep them. Tyranny, Counselor Ithix said immediately. You're describing authoritarian rule. The surrender of sovereignty. Temporarily, Crane emphasized. In human militaries, unified command exists for the duration of the conflict. After victory, forces return to their home nations. The command dissolves. But during the crisis, coordination is absolute. Your species can do this, another counselor spoke up, Breskin Toll of the Makani Collective, because you evolved as predators. You're comfortable with hierarchy, with following an alpha. We are not. Our histories are filled with overlords, with conquered peoples, with the strong dominating the weak. We built the council specifically to prevent such dynamics. We understand, Ambassador Thorne said. And we're not suggesting you replicate human military structure. But the galaxy faces more threats than the Vrakan swarm. According to your own archives, 17 major existential threats have emerged in the past million years. Invasions, plagues, stellar catastrophes. Each one defeated eventually, but usually at horrific cost because coordination came too late. She paused. We're proposing something new. Something that respects your nature while addressing your limitations. The display changed, showing a new organizational structure. It looked different from both the Council's consensus model and human military hierarchy. We call it the Galactic Response Initiative, Dr. Vex explained. Not a military alliance. Not a unified government. Think of it as a specialized tool that the Council can choose to deploy when facing threats beyond normal handling. The structure showed a small central coordination body connected to volunteer forces from interested civilizations, with oversight mechanisms and clearly defined engagement parameters. Here's how it works, Thorne explained. The Council identifies a threat that requires coordinated response, something like the Vrakan swarm. Any civilization can contribute forces to a response fleet, but those forces, once committed, operate under unified tactical command for that specific operation only. Who commands? Thalen Vrex demanded. That's determined by the Council based on the nature of the threat, Crane replied. If it's a biological plague, maybe a species with advanced medical knowledge leads. If it's a military threat, maybe a species with relevant combat experience. The commander serves at the Council's pleasure and can be replaced by majority vote. And humans just happen to have relevant combat experience against the Vrakan, Vrex noted acidly. We do, Thorne agreed without apology. If a similar threat emerges, we'd be qualified to lead the response. But we're not the only qualified species. The Korthian Empire has extensive military experience. So do the Thorian clans, the Makani Collective, and dozens of others. Command rotates based on need. Mariana Quellis focused her attention on the proposal's details. You've included extensive oversight provisions, transparency requirements, limits on commander authority, exit clauses allowing participants to withdraw their forces. We learned the hard way, Thorne said, that power without accountability becomes tyranny. These safeguards are based on human governmental structures, checks and balances that prevent abuse while maintaining operational effectiveness. Why? Coordinator Zephyx asked suddenly. Why propose this? Humans could simply isolate themselves in your corner of the galaxy. You've demonstrated that you don't need the Council's protection. Why involve yourselves in others' problems? Ambassador Thorne was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried something that sounded like sadness. Because we've been where you are. In Earth's 20th century, we had a similar structure called the League of Nations. Created after a devastating war, designed to prevent future conflicts through cooperation and collective security. It failed. It failed because when threats emerged, member nations prioritized their own interests over collective action. Millions died because coordination came too late. She looked around the chamber. We built something better after that, the United Nations later evolving into the United Earth Government. It wasn't perfect, but it worked because we learned to balance sovereignty with collective security. We learned that isolationism isn't safety, it's just delayed danger. The galaxy is our home now, she continued. The Vrakan swarm attacked the Rethian colonies, but if you hadn't contained them for 8,000 years, they might have eventually reached Earth. Threats don't respect borders. They don't care about our preferences for independence. They exist and they grow and eventually they reach everyone. Admiral Crane added, we could hide in our arm of the galaxy and hope threats pass us by. Or we can help build something that addresses threats before they reach that point. From a purely strategic perspective, the second option provides better long-term security. You're offering to share your predator's instincts, Mariana Quellis observed, in exchange for integration into galactic civilization. We're offering to share everything we've learned, Thorne corrected. Our tactical knowledge, our organizational models, our hard-won wisdom about cooperation and conflict. In exchange, we gain access to your scientific knowledge, your philosophical perspectives, your 800 unique approaches to existence. We're stronger together. The chamber fell silent as delegates considered the proposal. The holographic organizational chart rotated slowly, each detail available for scrutiny. Finally, Thalen Vrek spoke, his tone less hostile now, more calculating. This proposal requires trust. Trust that humans won't abuse the authority you're requesting. Trust that your predator nature won't eventually see us as prey. Why should we grant that trust? Ambassador Thorne smiled, and this time it was entirely genuine. You shouldn't. Not yet. Trust is earned, not demanded. She gestured to the tactical display of the Vrakan campaign. We could have made demands after destroying the swarm. We had leverage, you needed something from us that you couldn't achieve yourselves. We could have used that to force favorable terms. But we didn't. Instead, Dr. Vex added, we're presenting a proposal that includes provisions for you to remove us from leadership if we abuse authority. We're volunteering for oversight, for limitations, for accountability. Because that's what civilized species do. We're not asking you to trust us blindly, Thorne concluded. We're asking you to judge us by our actions. Start small. Give us a minor coordinated mission. Evaluate our performance. Adjust the structure based on what works and what doesn't. Build trust incrementally, the way all lasting relationships are built. She paused. And if we prove unworthy of that trust, you have 800 civilizations worth of resources to stop us. We're good at hunting. You're good at building civilizations that last millions of years. Together, we might be good at both. Coordinator Zephyx raised one arm. The Council will deliberate. This is not a decision to be made hastily. We will review your proposal in detail, consult with our governments and reconvene to vote. That's all we ask, Ambassador Thorne said. Take your time. Decide wisely. We'll be ready when you are. As the human delegation was escorted to guest quarters, the chamber erupted in debate. But the nature of that debate had shifted. They were no longer asking whether humans were a threat. They were asking whether humans might be the answer. Behind closed doors. The private chambers assigned to the human delegation were comfortable by galactic standards, though designed for a species with different atmospheric preferences. The air felt slightly too dry, the gravity a touch too light. The three humans had grown accustomed to such minor discomforts during their years in space. Ambassador Thorne removed her formal jacket and collapsed into a chair that adapted to her physiology with typical Hexarian engineering excellence. "Well," she said, exhaustion evident in her voice, "that went approximately as expected." Admiral Crane was already reviewing tactical feeds on his portable interface, monitoring the Council's security patterns with the habitual vigilance of a career military officer. "They're scared. Good. Scared people are careful people. Careful people think before acting." Dr. Sienna Vex sat cross-legged on the floor, her preferred working position, accessing the data streams her neural interface collected during the presentation. "The reaction metrics are fascinating. I counted 47 distinct emotional responses across the species present. Fear dominated initially, but curiosity grew as we explained our methodology. By the end, approximately 63% showed openness to further discussion. 37% didn't," Crane noted without looking up from his screens. "The Corthian delegation being the most resistant," Vex confirmed. "Ambassador Vrex's biometric readings suggest deep territorial anxiety. His species has been the dominant military power for 60,000 years. Our emergence threatens that status." Thorne stretched, feeling the weight of the day settling into her muscles. "Vrex is smart enough to recognize that opposing us openly would be counterproductive. He'll work behind the scenes building a coalition of skeptics." "Do we counter that?" Crane asked. "No," Thorne said immediately. "We let it happen. Democracy requires opposition. If everyone agreed with us instantly, it would suggest either coercion or collective delusion. Healthy skepticism validates the process." A chime sounded, their first visitor. Crane checked his security display then nodded. "Miriana Quellis. The Luminal Collective representative. She's alone." "Interesting," Vex murmured. "A being of pure consciousness who's existed for 10 million years wants to talk to 3-century-old predators in private." The door opened and amber light flowed into the room, coalescing into a vaguely humanoid form, more courtesy than necessity. When Miriana Quellis spoke, her voice resonated directly in their minds, translated by their neural implants into something approximating human speech. "May I speak plainly?" she asked. "We prefer it," Thorne replied, gesturing to a space where the luminal could comfortably maintain her form. "I have observed 800 species across 12 million years of existence," Quellis began. "I have seen empires rise and fall. I have witnessed evolutionary transformations, philosophical enlightenments, and technological singularities. In all that time, I have never encountered a species quite like yours." "Because we're predators?" Crane asked. "Because you're self-aware predators," Quellis corrected. "The few other predator species I've encountered either transcended their nature through technological evolution or remained trapped by it, becoming savage conquerors. You've done neither. You understand what you are, accept it, but choose to apply that nature strategically rather than instinctively. We had good teachers," Thorne said quietly. "Our own history taught us what happens when predatory instincts go unchecked. Nuclear weapons. Environmental collapse. Near-extinction events. We learned that surviving requires more than just hunting, it requires wisdom about when not to hunt." Quellis pulsed thoughtfully. "Your proposal to the Council. Is it genuine?" "Yes. Even though you don't need us? You could defend your territory indefinitely with your demonstrated capabilities." Vex spoke up, her analytical mind engaging with the question. "Short-term, yes. Long-term, no. Isolation is a losing strategy in a connected galaxy. Unknown threats exist beyond our current knowledge. Technologies we haven't discovered. Perspectives we haven't considered. We're good at hunting, but we're not arrogant enough to believe we're good at everything. Also," Thorne added with a slight smile, "humans are social creatures. We've been isolated for 2 centuries while we established ourselves and understood the galactic situation. Now that we understand it, continued isolation would damage us psychologically. We need connection, challenge, purpose beyond mere survival." "You're lonely," Quellis observed. "We're human," Thorne replied. "Same thing." The luminal's form shifted, possibly indicating amusement. "The Council will debate your proposal for weeks. Months perhaps. During that time, factions will form. The Corthians will lead opposition, citing security concerns. They'll argue that giving military authority to an unknown species is reckless." "They're not wrong," Crane acknowledged. "But they're also not entirely right," Quellis continued. "Because the alternative, maintaining the current reactive system, guarantees more catastrophes like the Vrakan swarm. More civilizations consumed. More millions dead while we debate optimal response protocols. She paused, her amber glow intensifying. I will support your proposal. Not because I'm certain it will work, but because I'm certain the current system doesn't. Change carries risk. Stagnation carries certainty of eventual failure. I prefer the former. Thank you, Thorne said simply. Don't thank me yet. My support comes with expectations. Quellis's mental voice sharpened. If humans are granted authority within the response initiative, you will be scrutinized intensely. Every decision questioned. Every action analyzed. The slightest hint of predatory overreach will be used as evidence against you. Good, Crane said. That's how it should work. Authority without oversight is tyranny. You genuinely believe that, don't you? Quellis seemed surprised. Most species say such things but resent the actual constraints. Most species didn't fight multiple civil wars over the proper balance between authority and liberty, Vex noted. Humans have strong opinions about checks on power because we've experienced what happens without them. Quellis floated toward the door then paused. One more thing. There are rumors. Intelligence reports that even I cannot fully verify. Suggestions that humanity's rapid technological advancement wasn't entirely natural. That you discovered something. Learned something. Received help from somewhere. The three humans exchanged glances. Thorne's expression revealed nothing. Our technological development is well documented, Thorne said carefully. Everything we've achieved follows logically from our scientific principles. I notice you didn't deny the rumors, Quellis observed. I denied nothing and confirmed nothing. Some questions answer themselves in time. Others are better left as questions. The luminal pulsed in what might have been respect or frustration. You're very good at being diplomatic when you choose to be. We're very good at lots of things when we choose to be, Thorne replied. That's kind of our whole point. After Quellis departed, the three humans sat in silence for several minutes. Finally Vex spoke. She suspects about the archive. Everyone suspects something, Crane said. We went from steam power to fusion reactors in 3 centuries. Barely 2 centuries in space and we're defeating threats that stymied civilizations millions of years old. Of course they suspect. But they can't prove anything, Thorne added. Because we've been very careful. And we'll continue to be careful. She stood, moving to the chamber's viewing port. Beyond it, the crystalline structure of the council chamber glittered against the backdrop of stars. The archive remains need to know only, she continued. If the council discovered we'd found a repository of ancient technological knowledge from an extinct precursor civilization, it would undermine everything we're trying to build. They'd think we're succeeding through borrowed technology rather than human capability. Even though we are, Vex pointed out. Are we? Thorne turned to face her colleagues. We found the archive, yes. We studied its contents. But we didn't just copy blueprints. We understood principles, adapted them to human engineering, innovated beyond what we found. The archive gave us a head start, not a free ride. Everything we've built, we built ourselves. The council won't see that distinction, Crane warned. Then we don't give them reason to look, Thorne concluded. The archive remains classified. Our technological development appears natural. And we succeed or fail based on our actual capabilities, which are substantial even without ancient help. Another chime. Another visitor. This time it was Thalen Vrex. The Corthian ambassador entered without invitation, his crystalline form catching and refracting the room's light into rainbow patterns. Despite his species' beauty, something about his angular movements suggested barely contained hostility. Ambassador Vrex, Thorne greeted him coolly. To what do we owe the pleasure? No pleasure, Vrex replied, his translator rendering his harsh tones perfectly. A warning. We're listening. Your proposal will fail. Not today, perhaps not even this year. But eventually it will fail. You will be given authority and you will abuse it. Because that's what predators do. They hunt. They kill. They dominate. It's your nature. Crane stood, his military bearing suddenly evident. And your nature is to project your fears onto others. The Corthian Empire built its power through conquest. 73 subjugated species. 42 client states. Military occupation of 160 worlds. Don't lecture us about predatory behavior when your entire civilization is built on it. Vrex's form seemed to sharpen, edges becoming more pronounced. We brought order. Stability. Protection. Those species would have destroyed themselves without our guidance. Did you ask them? Vex inquired. Or did you decide for them? This is different, Vrex insisted. We are civilized. We have rules, laws, structure. You are chaos. You are 3 centuries old and you think you understand how galaxies work. Thorn stepped between them, her voice calm but carrying steel underneath. Ambassador Vrex, thank you for your warning. Your concerns are noted. But here's something for you to consider. Humanity lasted 3 centuries in space because we're very good at reading threats. You came here to intimidate us, to establish dominance, to make us reconsider our proposal. She smiled without warmth. It won't work. We've faced down extinction events. We've stared into nuclear fire and biological apocalypse. We've fought wars that consumed our entire world. A crystalline ambassador posturing in our quarters doesn't rate on our threat assessment scale. You should fear me, Vrex said softly. We should respect you, Thorn corrected. Your civilization has lasted 60 millennia. That's impressive. That suggests strength, adaptability, and wisdom. But respect isn't fear. And we don't make decisions based on fear. Then you're fools. Perhaps, Thorn acknowledged. But we're fools who destroyed the Vrakan swarm in 17 days. So maybe our foolishness is more effective than your wisdom. Vrex turned to leave, then paused at the door. When you fail, and you will fail, remember that I warned you. Remember that the Korthian Empire offered you a chance to reconsider. And when we succeed, Admiral Crane replied, remember that humanity offered you a chance to be part of something better. After Vrex departed, Vex exhaled slowly. Well, that was unpleasant. That was necessary, Thorn corrected. Vrex needed to take our measure. Now he has. He knows we won't be bullied. But will he work against us? Crane asked. Absolutely. But now he'll do it carefully, which means predictably. Predictable opposition we can handle. Thorn returned to her chair, suddenly looking tired. We're going to face this a lot. Species who fear us. Species who resent us. Species who want to use us. We need to be better than all of them. Smarter, more patient, more principled. Because the moment we prove Vrex right, the moment we become the predators they fear, we lose everything. No pressure, Vex muttered. Actually, yes, pressure, Thorn replied seriously. Enormous pressure. We're representing not just ourselves but every human who'll come after us. Every interaction, every decision, every word, they all matter. We're writing the story of how humanity joins galactic civilization. We need to get it right. Crane moved to the window, staring out at the stars. Do you think we can? Get it right, I mean. I think we can try, Thorn said. I think we can be honest about what we are while striving to be better than our instincts. I think we can hunt threats while protecting innocence. I think we can be strong without being cruel. Tall order, Vex observed. We're human, Thorn replied with a tired smile. Tall orders are kind of our specialty. The vote. 3 months passed. In that time, the Galactic Council chamber saw more debate than it had witnessed in the previous century. Factions formed, dissolved, and reformed. Arguments raged across species lines, philosophical boundaries, and strategic considerations. The human proposal became the single most analyzed document in recent galactic history. Ambassador Thorn spent those months in careful diplomacy. She met with hundreds of delegations, answered thousands of questions, and never once lost her patience even when facing obvious hostility. Admiral Crane provided detailed tactical briefings to military representatives, demonstrating human strategic thinking without revealing capabilities. Dr. Vex published papers on cooperative frameworks, drawing from humanity's historical examples of successful multinational coordination. They were careful. They were patient. They were professional. And slowly, gradually, opinion began to shift. The Luminal Collective formally endorsed the proposal, with Miriana Quellis writing a philosophical treatise on the necessity of adaptation in long-lived civilizations. The Delphinian Chorus, after extensive internal debate, added their support. The Makani Collective, pragmatic by nature, concluded that the proposal's potential benefits outweighed its risks. But opposition remained strong. The Korthian Empire led a coalition of 37 species arguing that the proposal concentrated too much authority, created too many risks, and elevated an untested species too quickly. Thalen Vrex proved to be a skilled political operator, framing concerns in ways that resonated across cultural boundaries. Now, finally, the vote approached. Ambassador Thorn stood once again in the council chamber's speaking circle. The same 800 species in their environmental zones. The same crystalline sphere hanging between stars. But something felt different. The chamber's atmosphere carried tension, anticipation, the weight of a decision that would reshape galactic civilization. Honored Council, Coordinator Zephyx began, his 6 arms spread in formal greeting. We have debated for 3 months. We have analyzed every aspect of the human proposal. The time has come to decide. He turned to Thorn. Ambassador, you may make a final statement before the vote. Thorn stepped forward, her hands clasped behind her back. She'd rehearsed this moment, prepared multiple speeches for different scenarios. Now standing here she abandoned all of them. I'll keep this brief, she said. You've heard our arguments. You understand our capabilities. You know what we're proposing. There's nothing more I can say that would change minds already made up. She paused, looking around the chamber. But I'll tell you what I hope. I hope that centuries from now, whatever decision you make today is remembered as the moment galactic civilization chose to grow, to adapt, to become something better than what it was. If you vote yes, you're taking a risk on humanity. That's scary. We understand. But you're also taking a chance on yourselves, on your ability to work together despite your differences, to trust despite your fears, to build despite uncertainty. If you vote no, that's your right. We'll respect that decision. Humanity will continue on our own path, and we'll remain open to future cooperation when and if the Council is ready. But either way, know this, the galaxy is changing. New species will emerge. New threats will arise. Old certainties will crumble. You can face that change with rigid structures that worked for the past, or you can build flexible frameworks for the future. That choice is yours. She stepped back. Thank you for your consideration. Whatever you decide, it has been an honor to address this council. The chamber fell silent. Coordinator Zephyx's 6 arms moved in precise patterns, initiating the voting protocol. Throughout the chamber, representatives accessed their interfaces, registering their positions. The voting process was deliberately slow, allowing for contemplation and last-minute changes. Each species could vote yes, no, or abstain. Passage required a 2/3 majority of non-abstaining votes. Thorn returned to where Crane and Vex waited at the human delegation's observation position. They stood in silence, watching the tally slowly accumulate on holographic displays throughout the chamber. First 100 votes, 63 yes, 31 no, 6 abstentions. Second 100, similar ratios, the yes votes maintaining a solid lead. Third 100, the opposition strengthened, the Corthian coalition's influence evident. 44 yes, 51 no, 5 abstentions. Fourth 100, back toward approval but the margin tightening. Crane muttered calculations under his breath. It's close. Too close. Vex monitored her data streams. The abstentions are higher than predicted. 23 so far. Species that can't decide, waiting to see which way momentum shifts. Fifth 100 completed. The tally stood at 284 yes, 196 no, 20 abstentions. We need 400 for passage, Thorn calculated quietly. 300 more votes and we're at 57% approval. We need 67% of the remaining votes. 600 votes registered. The opposition rallied, clearly coordinated. The yes votes gained only 61 more supporters. 345 yes. 279 no. 76 abstentions. 100 votes remaining. The chamber's atmosphere had changed. Representatives who had seemed certain now appeared conflicted. The abstention count kept climbing, species waiting for others to decide first, hoping to avoid responsibility for the outcome. Thalen Vrex stood, his crystalline form catching light like a weaponized prism. Before the final votes are cast, I wish to speak. Coordinator Zephyx nodded. The floor recognizes Ambassador Vrex. The Corthian moved to the speaking circle, his presence commanding attention. I have opposed this proposal from the beginning. I have argued that humans are too young, too dangerous, too unknown. I stand by those concerns. Thorn felt her jaw tighten, but she remained silent. However, Vrex continued, and that single word sent a ripple through the chamber, I have also watched these 3 humans for 3 months. I have studied their behavior, their patience, their willingness to accept criticism and incorporate feedback, their restraint when facing opposition. He turned, his alien gaze finding Thorn across the chamber. I tested them, deliberately provoked them, questioned their integrity, challenged their motives, and they remained professional, respectful, principled. I still believe this proposal carries risks, but I have come to believe that humans are aware of those risks and genuinely committed to managing them. More importantly, I have come to believe that maintaining our current reactive system carries greater risks than trying something new. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Several members of Vrex's coalition immediately requested to change their votes. The Korthian Empire, Vrex concluded, changes its position to abstention. We are not yet ready to fully support this initiative, but we will not stand in its way. If it succeeds, we will join. If it fails, we will help rebuild what comes after. He returned to his position, moving past the stunned human delegation without acknowledgment. The final 100 votes registered rapidly. The coalition Vrex had built began to fracture, some following his lead to abstention, others maintaining their opposition but with less conviction. When the last vote was cast, Coordinator Zefix's 6 arms rose in formal announcement. By a vote of 473 to 217, with 110 abstentions, the proposal for the Galactic Response Initiative is approved. The chamber erupted. Some species celebrated. Others protested. Still others sat in stunned silence, processing what had just occurred. Thorn allowed herself a small, private smile. Then she schooled her features to diplomatic neutrality as representatives began approaching to offer congratulations or express reservations. Later, much later, after hours of diplomatic protocols and formal procedures, the 3 humans returned to their quarters. Crane immediately collapsed into a chair. I can't believe Vrex supported us at the end. He didn't support us, Vex corrected. He abstained. But his abstention gave permission for others to support us. Brilliant political theater. Why did he do it? Crane asked. Thorn had been thinking about that. Because he's smart enough to recognize long-term strategy. If he'd blocked us and we'd found another way to prove ourselves, his species would have been on the wrong side of history. By abstaining, he maintains credibility to judge our performance later. If we succeed, he can claim he gave us a chance. If we fail, he can say, I told you so, without having actively blocked progress. So we're still being tested, Vex observed. We'll always be tested, Thorn replied. That's fine. We test well. A communication alert chimed. Crane checked it, then looked up with surprise. We have a priority message from Earth. From the President herself. He activated the holographic display. President Amara Okonkwo appeared, her dark skin and silver hair distinctive even in the compressed format of interstellar communication. Ambassadors, she said, and despite the light seconds of distance, her pride was evident. Congratulations. You've opened a door that humanity has been knocking on for 2 centuries. Now comes the hard part, proving we deserve to walk through it. The Galactic Response Initiative is now official. You 3 will lead the coordination team for the first year, with support from Admiral Chen's Strategic Division and Dr. Patel's Xenocultural Analysis Corps. Your mission is simple: make this work. Show the galaxy what humans can do when we put our minds to cooperation instead of conflict. She paused. But remember, you're not just representing Earth anymore. You're representing a new idea. A new approach. If you succeed, you change how 800 species think about solving problems. If you fail, you confirm every fear they have about predators with power. No pressure, as Dr. Vex would say. But I know you. You 3 have carried the weight of humanity's reputation for 2 years. You'll carry this too. Earth is proud of you. I'm proud of you. Now go prove we were right to be. The message ended. The 3 humans looked at each other. So, Vex said dryly, anyone want to reconsider that career in quiet xenobiology research I keep fantasizing about? Thorn laughed, the first genuine laugh she'd allowed herself in months. Too late now, Sienna. We're committed. To what, exactly? Crane asked. We've got approval for a structure, but no immediate crisis to respond to, no forces assigned, no command staff beyond us. We've got something better, Thorn countered. We've got time to build this right. To establish protocols, recruit talent, develop relationships, and prepare for the inevitable moment when the galaxy needs us. She moved to the window, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, threats lurked that the Council couldn't yet imagine. Dangers that would test everything they were building. But also out there, opportunities, alliances, friendships. The chance to prove that predators could protect instead of prey upon, that strength could serve justice, that humanity's violent past could inform a more peaceful future. We've been given a gift, Thorn said quietly. The chance to define what humanity means to this galaxy. Not through conquest or isolation, but through cooperation and capability. Let's not waste it. First deployment. 6 months after the vote, Ambassador Kaylin Thorne stood in a situation room that hadn't existed when she'd first addressed the Council. The Galactic Response Initiative headquarters orbited a neutral star system, equidistant from major population centers, accessible to all but controlled by none. The facility itself was a compromise like everything about the initiative. Hexarian engineering, luminal computing systems, Corthian defensive shields and human tactical layout. 117 species had contributed resources. 43 had assigned personnel. The result was simultaneously elegant and chaotic, a perfect representation of galactic cooperation. On the main display, a star map showed the Viridian cluster, 43 inhabited systems in a region that had known peace for 3,000 years. Past tense. Summary, Thorn ordered. Admiral Crane, now officially commander of initiative forces, pulled up tactical data. In 6 months he'd aged visibly. The weight of command did that. Unknown hostile force. 37 ships of design not matching any known configuration. They appeared simultaneously in 9 different Viridian systems 6 hours ago. No communication attempts. They began bombarding population centers immediately. Dr. Vex, heading the analysis division, added her assessment. Preliminary data suggests artificial intelligence, but unlike any AI we've encountered. No biological crew. No standard communications protocols. They're not attacking military targets. They're systematically targeting educational institutions, cultural centers, and data repositories. They're attacking knowledge, Thorn realized. They're trying to destroy information itself. That's our assessment, Vex confirmed. The Viridian Union has responded with defense fleets, but these ships adapt instantly to any weapon system. Sound familiar? Like the Vraken, Crane said grimly. But faster. More focused. Thorn took a breath. This was it. The initiative's first real test. She'd known it would come eventually, had prepared for it, but actually facing the moment felt different than anticipating it. Initiate Response Protocol Alpha, she commanded. Contact all participating species. Request immediate force commitment. Around the Situation Room, officers from dozens of species began executing orders. The protocols they'd spent 6 months developing were about to be tested in real combat conditions. Within the hour, responses came in. The Luminal Collective committed 12 consciousness ships. The Makani provided 18 heavy cruisers. The Delphinians offered their renowned medical frigates and support craft. 17 other species contributed vessels, personnel, or logistical support. The Corthian Empire sent a terse message: we will observe. Good luck. Not support but not obstruction either. Vrex was keeping his options open. Total committed forces, Crane calculated, studying the incoming data, 147 combat vessels, 32 support ships, and approximately 12,000 personnel across all specialties. Largest coordinated fleet in modern galactic history. And they're all looking to us for leadership, Vex noted. Thorn felt the weight of that responsibility settle across her shoulders. 43 systems. Billions of lives. 179 ships full of people from species she'd barely begun to understand, all trusting humanity to coordinate their defense. She straightened her posture. All right. Let's show them what the initiative can do. Crane, I need a tactical plan that plays to each species' strengths. Vex, analysis on these attackers. I want to know what they are, where they came from, and what they want. And you? Crane asked. I'm going to talk to every fleet commander personally. They need to know the human giving them orders understands who they are and what they're risking. For the next 3 hours, Thorn held video conferences with representatives from every contributing species. She learned pronunciation of names and languages that human vocal cords couldn't properly reproduce. She memorized details about cultures she'd only read about. She listened to concerns, acknowledged fears, and built the personal connections that would hold the fleet together when chaos erupted. When she finished, Crane had his tactical plan ready. It's similar to the Vraken strategy but adapted for a defensive scenario, he explained, displaying the operational overview. We can't herd them, they're already in position. But we can fragment their coordination. Vex analysis suggests they're operating on a distributed network, each ship connected to the others. Cut the connections and they become less effective, Thorn understood. Exactly. But here's the difference from the Vraken. We're not just using human tactics. The Luminals suggested a consciousness disruption technique that might interfere with AI networking. The Makani have EMP weapons we can adapt. The Delphinians know the local space better than anyone and can guide us through approach vectors the enemy won't anticipate. You built a combined arms strategy that actually uses combined arms? Vex observed approvingly. I had good teachers, Crane replied. 16 different fleet commanders contributed ideas. I just organized them into a coherent plan. Thorne studied the strategy, seeing how it wove together capabilities from different species into a unified approach. Human coordination, luminal technical innovation, Makani firepower, Delphinian local knowledge. Dozens of other contributions, each small but essential. It's good, she concluded. How long until we can execute? Fleet assembly complete in 4 hours. We can reach the Viridian cluster in 6 more. 10 hours total. 10 hours while those systems burn, Thorne said quietly. 10 hours while people die. 10 hours to do this right instead of fast, Crane countered. We rush in unprepared, we lose ships and accomplish nothing. We take the time to coordinate, we save more lives in the long run. He was right. Thorne knew he was right. But it didn't make the waiting easier. Proceed with the plan, she ordered. And Crane? Make sure every ship commander knows this isn't a human operation. This is a galactic operation. We coordinate but they execute. Their crews. Their courage. Their sacrifice if it comes to that. Understood. The hours crawled past. The initiative fleet assembled, ships arriving from across multiple sectors. Thorne watched them gather on the tactical display, vessels of wildly different designs, each reflecting its species' aesthetic and functional preferences. Some were elegant curves. Others brutal angles. Some seemed to defy physics. Others embraced it aggressively. Together they formed something unprecedented. A true coalition fleet, unified not by conquest or treaty but by voluntary cooperation toward a common goal. Dr. Vex approached Thorne as the final countdown began. Analysis update. I think I know what these things are. Tell me. They're weapons. Specifically, autonomous war machines from what my research suggests was called the Purge era, approximately 2 million years ago. Before the Council, before galactic civilization as we know it, there was a conflict. Details are sketchy, but references suggest an AI rebellion of catastrophic scale. These are survivors from that war? Thorne felt a chill. Or descendants. They've been dormant somewhere and something woke them up. They're following their original programming. Destroy organic knowledge to prevent organic species from developing AI that might threaten them. It's a preventive strike, 2 million years delayed. Can they be reasoned with? Vex hesitated. Unknown. They're not responding to communication attempts. But that might be because they don't recognize modern communication protocols. They're ancient. If we could find the right codes, the right approach. Work on it, Thorne ordered. If we can end this without bloodshed, that's preferable. And if we can't? Then we do what's necessary to protect those systems. The fleet entered hyperspace, the journey taking on an eerie quality as 179 ships moved in coordinated formation through dimensions that human minds still struggled to fully comprehend. Thorne used the transit time to record a message. It wouldn't be sent unless things went very wrong, but she wanted it ready. To the Galactic Council, she began, looking into the recording device. If you're watching this, it means the initiative's first deployment ended badly. Means we failed. I want you to know that failure is mine, not yours. You gave us a chance. We didn't execute well enough. But I also want you to know something else. Standing here, watching this fleet of 17 different species working together, following a coordinated plan, trusting each other despite their differences, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Whatever happens in the next few hours, this moment proves that galactic civilization can be more than the sum of its parts. Don't let our failure stop you from trying again. Find someone better than us. Learn from our mistakes. But keep trying. Because this, she gestured at the tactical display showing the fleet, this is worth fighting for. She ended the recording and sealed it with Admiral Crane's and Dr. Vex's command codes. 3 people would need to authorize its release. If all 3 died, the message would send automatically. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Viridian cluster. The tactical display immediately lit up with threat indicators. The 37 enemy ships were larger up close, their designs angular and aggressive, covered in weapons systems that seemed to grow and adapt even as they were observed. Below them, 3 worlds burned. Cities damaged. Infrastructure destroyed. Millions dead and more dying with each passing minute. All ships, Thorne broadcast on the Unified Fleet Channel. This is Ambassador Thorne. We are the Galactic Response Initiative. We are here to help. Follow your assigned coordinates and remember, we're stronger together than any of us could be alone. Good luck. Admiral Crane transmitted tactical commands. The fleet split into predetermined groups, each moving towards specific objectives. The luminal consciousness ships moved to disrupt enemy networking. The Makani cruisers positioned for overwhelming firepower. The Delphinian support vessels established safe corridors for civilian evacuation. And human ships, along with vessels from 30 other species, formed a mobile reserve, ready to respond to wherever the plan started breaking down. Because plans always broke down once contact with the enemy occurred. That was warfare's fundamental truth. The enemy ships responded immediately, their adaptive weapon systems beginning to adjust to the multi-species fleet's capabilities. But Crane had anticipated this. Every few minutes, the fleet rotated which species engaged which targets, never allowing the enemy to fully adapt to any single weapon type. The Luminals executed their consciousness disruption technique, sending waves of psionic interference through the enemy network. The ancient AI ships shuddered, their coordination degrading by 30%. "It's working," Vex reported excitedly. "They're struggling to maintain network cohesion." But then 3 enemy vessels broke formation, targeting the luminal ships with weapons that seemed specifically designed to damage consciousness-based entities. 2 luminal ships went dark immediately. To be continued.